Hi everyone, welcome to the Majlis. My name is Yasmin Al-Khwatir, and with me today I have His Excellency the Ambassador Jean-Philippe Linteau. Jean-Philippe, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you here as the Canadian Ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, and Yemen, and previously the Consul General in Dubai. You've had this post since May 2023, of course, following a 5-year pause in relations. And now that you've been here for almost 2 years, really, what would you say your approach has been to re-strengthening ties, and perhaps what have been some of the highlights of your tenure so far?
Yeah. Look, there's been a lot of momentum in the bilateral relations after the resumption, the normalization of relations. I arrived in July after we normalized in May 23. And, the desire of both countries was to resume, or not just resume, but take it to a higher level. So that's created a lot of momentum. And, our prime ministers, the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau and His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, I've spoken a number of times since then, and ministers have visited both ways. So our foreign minister was here, our Minister of International Development, and I think the ministers from Saudi who went to Canada are the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Mining and Industry and Mines, Minister of Education. So you can see there's a lot of desire to do more. But it's not just about the bilateral relationship, right? There's also a lot of momentum in the people ties and also the business ties. So we've resumed the scholarship program for Saudi students. So we now receive some of the brightest Saudi students who come to the top universities in Canada, and they're doing very well. We also had our first Canada-Saudi Education Forum in May 2024, where we had 100 universities and colleges that were sitting together to find new partnership opportunities. But really, what I've been struck with the most is the number of private sector folks that are coming this way. It's incredible. In fact, this week at LEAP, this is the LEAP event. So IT companies are here. We have over 50 IT companies that are at LEAP, and that's 4 times more than last year. And it's the first time that we have a national pavilion. So you can see that we're progressing. We're moving in the right direction. But you also asked me about the highlight, and the highlight for me is nothing of these things. This is the diplomatic work that we do, but the highlight is really my travel around the country. I've been pretty much everywhere, and I've appreciated the beauty and the diversity of the kingdom. But one thing that was really striking is everywhere people are different, but people are just as welcoming everywhere. I've been in the south, in the east, in the west. It's been remarkable, and so that to me is the highlight so far.
That's lovely. Can I ask what's been your favorite place to visit so far?
So if I answer, then I'm not a diplomat, right? There's places that I've really enjoyed everywhere. Clearly, Alula is somewhere magical, and I loved my visits to Medina, to Asir, to Al Ofuf, so many nice places.
Mashallah, you're really well traveled domestically, but you're also the ambassador to Bahrain and Oman and Yemen too. So this is, 4 Gulf countries that you're in charge of. It's quite a lot to manage. How do you do that?
Right. I may look a bit tired today because of that, but look, that we be resident like we are in Riyadh or non-resident. As an ambassador, as an embassy, what we try to do is create linkages to people and make connections, have contacts in order to advance our common interest and build relationships that are useful for our country. So to do that, we have to be present, that we be resident or not. So in Bahrain, I've been 10 times already to Bahrain. In Yemen, I'm the first Canadian ambassador to have gone there in 10 years when I went to present my credential to President Alimi. We've taken trade missions to Bahrain and Oman. So you see, we're visible, we're present, despite not being resident.
No, that's quite a lot to juggle, but you seem to be doing it all successfully. And then maybe you could tell us also a little bit about the history of the relation. So when did the Canadian-Saudi relationship begin, and how has it evolved so far?
Right. So we've established formal diplomatic relations in 1973. And so that's 5 decades ago already, and a bit more. And the relationship has evolved significantly in that time. But what hasn't really changed is that we share a common interest related to regional and global security, right? We're partners on that front, and that includes energy security, humanitarian work, counterterrorism. Those are things that we've been working together for a long time. And so Saudi Arabia is a very important partner for Canada, from a security perspective, from a political perspective, from an economic perspective. We collaborate bilaterally. That's the work that we do here, but we also collaborate multilaterally in forums like the G20, where we're both members of that, and in the UN. And so that's all happening, and that's the government to government collaboration. But the collaboration is obviously deeper and broader. And I like to remind people of a historic event, is that in the 70s, Bell Canada was here in the kingdom and was involved in laying the first, the phone connections across the kingdom. So thousands of Canadians came to Saudi Arabia in the 70s. And for many Saudi households, their first phone was provided by Bell Canada, and then the company that's STC today, as some roots, was set up in a very similar way to Bell Canada, right?
Oh, that's so interesting.
That's 50 years ago. And but we also have connections, like the fact that we're both very large oil producers, so there's a lot of connectivity in that. And in the future, will we see more on mining? That's a great thing. But apart from infrastructure, it's also the human capital connection that exists between the two countries. So thousands of Saudi doctors have gone to Canada for advanced training and are members of the board in Canada. So that's a really, really concrete connection that exists and that has grown and continues to grow between our two countries.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear. I mean, we collaborate across such a wide variety of sectors. And when we think about the changes happening in Saudi Arabia now, specifically with Vision 2030, there's so much that we want to expand into. I mean, you brought up mining. That's one field that we're now becoming more aggressive about our growth in. So how do you see the potential for this relationship to grow as Saudi seeks to diversify?
Yeah, so look, the relationship is really, for us, I see two main pillars. One is the people, right? The people-to-people tie, and I've given some examples. And then the second one is around the vision and how it's changing Saudis and how it's changing the way that we interact with Saudi Arabia. So on the people, I've talked about healthcare, I've talked about universities. So in the old days, it was just student exchange, but now we're looking for institutional arrangements. So a more robust framework of collaboration. I also, when it comes to people-to-people ties, I also talk about how Canadians are here. We have 14,000 Canadians living in the kingdom, and these people are making a contribution to achieving the vision. They may be working in the private sector, in the government, in universities, and they're really contributing. I also have to remind folks that the Muslim population has grown a lot in Canada. So we now have 2 million Muslims in Canada. That's 5% of the population. And for those people, the connection to Saudi Arabia, because of the holy sites, is very strong. And, I regularly consult with imams back in Canada to get a sense of what their views are and their priorities, and so that I can represent them as well here in the kingdom. So that's the people-to-people ties that are so important. But on the vision, we're really talking about, we have common interests in foreign policy, right? Saudi Arabia wants a peaceful neighborhood that where it can achieve its economic potential. Well, we also want a peaceful neighborhood. On the economic side, we see a massive increase in Canadian private sector interest in the kingdom. And, we have to also say that many of the reforms that we see in the kingdom are very important to us from a values perspective, from Canadian values perspective. So, for example, the empowerment of women in the workforce, promoting economic prosperity, promoting modernizing governance, all these things that are happening in Saudi Arabia through the vision, those are things that we fully support and endorse, right?
Yeah, I mean, also does not occur to me that the job of the ambassador stretches so far. I mean, consulting with the imams in Canada, for example, as someone who's ambassador to the custodian of the holy mosques, is a detail that wouldn't have occurred to me, but it certainly makes sense, and it's incredible service that you're doing. And in the same line of talking about Vision 2030, I know that you also have a background as a senior trade commissioner and as a director of clean tech. So one of the important fields for Vision 2030 is the diversification from oil, includes obviously renewable tech and renewable energy. So how do you see trade opportunities and investment opportunities between the two countries in that field?
Well, so Canada is a global leader when it comes to clean technologies and sustainability, right? And that's part of our country's brand. Even though we're a big producer of oil, actually, we're number 4 in terms of producers of oil. Saudi Arabia is number 3, and we're number 4. But we want to produce those natural resources in a more sustainable way, in a way that reduces emissions, that reduces the environmental impact. So we see a lot of potential for collaboration when it comes to sustainability, starting with how we extract our natural resources, right? There's a lot that we can learn from each other on that front. So things like carbon capture or hydrogen, those are things that are being pushed and developed here in the kingdom and also in Canada. So we can collaborate on that. And one example I'll give you that's quite striking. So there's a company in Canada called Carbon Cure that produces as a technology to produce green concrete. And Carbon Cure is installed in dozens of countries and around the world. They've just made their first installation in Saudi Arabia. And you know what? It is their largest installation in the world. And it's here in the kingdom. So, the ambition that exists in the kingdom is a good match for our capabilities when it comes to green technologies and sustainability. And another point I wanted to make is, I said there's a large community of Canadians that are here. If you knew how many of them are working on areas related to sustainability, it's quite incredible that because this is a strength in Canada, they come here and they're able to contribute to achieving the vision and the sustainability elements of the vision.
It's, I think, very important that Canada and Saudi Arabia are both aligned, despite being large oil producers, like you said, in terms of investing in renewable energy and really becoming global leaders together in this field. Because if we look at larger global affairs now and a Trump America, there's a bit more of a withdrawal from focus on clean energy. There's also a large focus on tariffs to critical partners in trade, including Canada. So seeing as you have a background in trade, I wanted to ask you, I think a lot of people are confused as to, what do these extremely high tariffs mean? How does it impact global trade?
Right. So look, I'll start just by picking up on the point on green energy. Green energy is an essential element of our competitiveness as a country. In Canada. We have a lot of green electricity. And what I'm seeing in Saudi Arabia is the cheapest new power that's being installed in the world, right? Because you have such an abundance of solar energy. This is going to make you more competitive. So it's not time to retrench from green energy. It's time to double down in order to be competitive tomorrow. On tariffs, look, I get this question a lot these days, as you can imagine. My view is that, and our view as a country, is that trade has been good. Trade has produced a lot of prosperity and jobs and has taken people out of poverty, and it's been overall good. So trade needs rules, and trade needs safeguards and whatnot. But tariffs are not the way, right? Tariffs can affect the global economy by increasing prices, and it changes trade flows. It disrupts supply chains. The Canada-US bilateral economic relationship is the largest one between any two countries in the world. The largest one, right? Actually, we're the top buyer of US goods. So Canada buys more US goods than China, Japan, France, and the UK combined, right? Canada is also a big supplier to the US of goods that are used to make things in the US. So, for example, US cars have Canadian parts, right? And millions of jobs in Canada, but also in the US, depend on this trade. So we trade with the US about $2.5 billion US dollars a day, right? So that is a lot of money. And so what this means is that Canada supports 9 million jobs in the US. And when we sell things like affordable aluminum to the US, we make their exports and their manufacturing more competitive. So because this relationship is so positive, I'm very confident that we will be able to find a way forward that will be beneficial for both countries. Canada is committed to free trade. Canada is the only country in the G7 that has a free trade agreement with all the other G7 countries. But at the same time, we are looking to diversify our relationships. And so what does this mean here for our relationship is it's a good time for Canadians and Saudis to think about how they can grow the trading relationship that we have, right? We trade about $4 billion a year, right? And I said 2.5 a day with the US. And so there's room for growth. There's room to do more. Now is a good time to say, okay, we're both committed to rules-based trade processes. Let's see how we can grow that together.
What are encouragements you have, or how would you, best see this growth happening? So trade increase between Canada and Saudi Arabia, what would that look like to you?
So, traditionally, we were working together on things like oil and gas, which I've mentioned, and maybe military cooperation. But with Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia is diversifying its economy. It's investing in all kinds of new sectors. So this is where we have to go. We have to go in these new areas, be they mining. We talked about mining. We're the top country when it comes to mining. Education, healthcare, tourism, entertainment. Those are all sectors that we need to work on together. But we also need to work on together on innovation. So finding the technologies and solutions of tomorrow. And my observation so far in Saudi Arabia is that there's a desire or a propensity to adopt innovation, an openness to innovation that maybe is quite unique, right? There's some other countries that want to wait, that it's been tested and it's been proven elsewhere. But here there's a desire to try. And so I think there's a lot of good stuff coming out of Canada that can find a test bed here where people are willing to try to say, okay, we're going to try this and give it a go, and then we can build products and industries together in the future in the spirit of diversification that we are both pursuing.
I mean, one other sector that comes to mind for me is I know Canada has been quite successful at promoting the video game sector and investment there. And as you know, that's also a big focus for Saudi. So really the possibilities are just endless in terms of where we could collaborate and innovate together.
That's right. So I mean, that's a really good that's a really good sector, and one on which we are working. There's an extension to that, and I met a company this week that is our largest Canadian-owned video game company, but they also do immersive experiences, right? And so I don't know if you visited the Dior exhibit at the National Museum.
Yes.
And so if you saw the interactive element, like the Gold Room, that was done by Canadian technology companies, right? So video games is a great growing sector, but there's all kinds of new things we can do with technology to entertain people. Video plus
100%.
and there's so much desire and interest for this here in this country, with a young population, with population that's looking for new experiences, and so that's a great area.
Yeah, we're very young and we're very digitally native, so it's anything technology related I think is going to do well here. Switching gears a little bit, I also wanted to talk about Canadian Flag Day. I know, it's the 50th, I believe, of
the 50th anniversary.
The 50th anniversary. Yeah. And, you're wearing the Canadian flag pin right now. So I wanted to ask about the significance of that.
Right. So thank you. Actually, I misspoke. It's actually the 60th. So 1965, 15 February, Canada adopted the maple leaf that we all know, the red the red flag with the leaf in the middle. And this maple leaf has come to represent who we are as a country. Mm-hmm. And it's a source of pride. It's a source of it's a symbol that Canadians wear proudly, and you see it all over the world. Especially at this time, this year, there's renewed sense of national pride in Canada. And so celebrating the 60th anniversary of our flag, it represents who we are as a country, close to nature, but also it represents the diversity that we have as a country. And the maple was very important for the Indigenous peoples of Canada, because when Europeans came to Canada, they saw the Indigenous peoples making maple syrup, and learned how to make maple syrup, where we tap the maple tree, take the sap and boil it to make this sweet, delicious liquid that we eat a lot of in Canada.
That's a lovely history. Thank you for sharing that. And, speaking of another Canadian characteristic is a lot of Canadians are bilingual and speak French. And so I think it's only appropriate to ask one of the last questions in French. Donc, Votre Excellence, selon vous, quel est l'avenir des relations entre l'Arabie Saoudite et le Canada?
Merci de me poser une question en français. J'espère que vos auditeurs vont pouvoir suivre la réponse. L'avenir de notre relation, bien sûr, sera axé sur des partenariats, sur la recherche de nos intérêts communs et de construire des partenariats qui nous permettront de faire avancer ces choses-là. Comme j'ai discuté auparavant, le partenariat commercial est très important, et je pense que à l'heure actuelle, avec l'incertitude dans le monde et l'incertitude avec notre principal partenaire économique, ce sera une grande priorité avec l'Arabie Saoudite à court terme. Mais cette année, en 2025, le Canada est aussi le président du G7, donc du groupe des 7 grandes économies mondiales. Et dans notre présidence, on va mettre l'accent sur des choses comme la paix au Moyen-Orient, la sécurité maritime, la sécurité économique. Ce sont tous des sujets sur lesquels on va pouvoir travailler dans l'année qui vient avec l'Arabie Saoudite. Mais à plus long terme, encore une fois, je pense que les choses comme l'innovation, l'investissement, le commerce, la durabilité sont des thèmes, des thématiques moteurs qu'on va pouvoir continuer à exploiter pour travailler ensemble. Je m'attends à voir un nombre croissant d'entreprises canadiennes qui viennent ici. Vraiment, c'est incroyable. Cette semaine, entre un événement de technologie LEAP et un autre événement en infrastructure, on a plus de 90 entreprises canadiennes qui sont ici à Riyad cette semaine. 90. C'est assez incroyable de voir cet appétit. Alors, je m'attends de voir ça continuer à grandir et je m'attends aussi à voir plus de présence saoudienne au Canada. C'est important pour l'Arabie saoudite de démontrer comment le pays a changé. C'est important de raconter cette histoire-là aux Canadiens. Alors, c'est quelque chose sur lequel je vais travailler étroitement avec l'ambassadrice saoudienne au Canada. On en discute fréquemment. L'Arabie saoudite est devenue un pays carrefour, un pays rassembleur. Le monde entier vient ici, qui viennent du nord, du sud, de l'est, de l'ouest. Tout le monde vient ici en Arabie saoudite. Alors, pour le Canada, c'est fantastique de pouvoir travailler ensemble et aussi de pouvoir rejoindre toute la planète via Riyad parce que tout le monde y vient maintenant. Et finalement, j'ai pas noté, mais je dois noter que dans les 10 prochaines années, on a des événements incroyables qui vont se passer en Arabie saoudite. On a l'Expo 2030, on a la Coupe du Monde 2034. Ce sera d'autres opportunités de travailler ensemble. Alors pour moi, les 10 prochaines années seront la décennie de l'Arabie saoudite et le Canada veut faire partie de cette histoire-là.
Donc, comme nous le disons en arabe, Inch'Allah, c'est incroyable de voir le changement rapide de l'Arabie saoudite et aussi le travail qu'au Canada, c'est intégral, je pense, pour tout ça. Et donc, Votre Excellence, nous vous remercions beaucoup pour votre temps et vos conseils aussi. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. This has been an incredible speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. It's an honor to be here with you, to be speaking to your listeners, and I wish you all the best for many more successful podcasts in the future.
Thank you.